Okay, so before we run it, let's go through the solution context and give you a bit of a preview of the features you're about to see. Now, this use case tends to resonate with organizations of all sizes, as many of them have generic email inboxes that are shared across a group of users and can receive any number of different types of content. Sometimes this might be a legal agreement, an invoice, feedback around a recent purchase, and things of that nature. And unfortunately, a small set of users are in charge of parsing what comes in and redirecting it to the appropriate teams. So a very manual effort to sort through those mails, very little, if any, tracking and accountability along the way, and of course, as a result, the customer experience will suffer. Now, what you're going to see here is AgilePoint with a true multi-agent, multi-vendor agentic orchestration is going to serve as the Swiss Army knife for any types of emails that might come in. So you're going to see a number of different agents, one in charge of ingesting and categorizing that inbound email. What type of email is it? If it has an attachment of what type. And then from there, different process branches will be invoked with sub-agents with specialized skills to, say, parse the details of a newly executed legal agreement or an invoice, as an example, and handle the matching and processing from there on out. So of course, this removes all of the manual triage efforts, can hugely improve the response time in terms of getting back to the customer, and of course, drives accountability and task tracking along the way. Okay, so moving into our application, as we discussed, this process will trigger when an inbox that AgilePoint is monitoring receives an email. Now, if an attachment is present, it will be moved into one of the out-of-the-box repositories that AgilePoint supports and converted into text, which our agents can then use. Now, first, we have a classification agent, essentially in charge of determining what type of email is this and if there is an attachment of what type. This then branches off into a number of tools and sub-processes depending on our classification. So let's first take a look at our classification agent. So here you can see our access token into OpenAI, the model we'd like to use, and initial model parameters. Now moving into the system instructions, as you can see here, the overall goals are to classify the provided text into a number of predefined types that we've just discussed. The skills include identification of contractual, legal, and service-related language, and to make a deterministic classification for further use in our automation. The input is going to be the entire agreement text and email body text. Various instructions for the different document types. And the output being, again, a classification which determines how our workflow goes from here. Now, depending on what's attached, we have different sub-processes and tools that will be invoked as a result. As you're seeing here, I have two sub-agents with special skills to extract details from various legal agreements, namely statements of work or licensing agreements. They're very similar in configuration, so I won't go through both of them. Now moving into the system instructions, as you can see here, the goals are to extract structured metadata from a license agreement to facilitate legal document comparison and analysis. Various skills, including legal document parsing, identification of key clauses and metadata, and JSON formatting. As we discussed earlier, the context or input is going to be the entire agreement text. Various instructions how to parse this agreement, and of course the output here being a JSON structure. Now, as you can see here, coming out of these branches, we have different sub-processes, so let's go ahead and take a look at those. Again, I won't go through both of them, but as you're seeing here, I have the license agreement branch up on screen. So first, we're going to load those extracted details into our sub-process. So that we can make a comparison, we're going to retrieve the current contract details as stored in an existing system of record, in this case Salesforce, and invoke our metadata reconciliation agent to help us understand the differences. So bringing up the configuration, so as you can see here, we are a metadata comparison agent. Our goal is to compare structured metadata fields from our new agreement and what's retrieved from an existing system of record. Various skills. The input, of course, being here, the agreement metadata and Salesforce metadata, various instructions, and of course, again, the output here being a JSON structure. Now, lastly, we do have a sub-process specifically for invoice processing. In our case here, we're using Mindy, which is an intelligent document processing solution, but this workload could easily be handled by any agent. Okay, so with that, let's go ahead and run the application. Okay, so scenario one is going to be an invoice has just come in via email. As you can see here, the invoice is attached and the body of the email. So we'll go ahead and send this and kick off our first process. All right, so let's go in and track our process. Okay, so as you can see here, our classification agent has detected an invoice, and as a result, the invoice subprocess has been activated. So let's take a look at that. Okay, so looking at our tracker, Mindy has extracted key details from the invoice. It's determined that a PO exists that matches the details of that invoice. So let's go back into our task list. Okay, so moving back into our task list, we now have a task sitting with us to process the invoice. And as you're seeing here, all of the relevant details have been extracted from that invoice. We have the purchase order details and the invoice here in line. Now, in this case, the various line items do match, but recall that we do have logic to handle partial submissions. And down below, the actions where we can proceed with the remaining steps of this process. Let's go back into our page and we'll kick off one more instance, this time for a license agreement. All right, now in scenario two, we have a license agreement that's attached. The scenario is such that we have an existing customer making a new purchase, and they're making red lines to a legal agreement. Now, obviously, the red lines will tell us what's changed in a legal contract, but won't give us the context around how those changes compare, say, to a prior agreement. So let's go ahead and kick this off. Okay, so let's go ahead and track our process. All right, so as you're seeing here, our classification agent has detected that license agreement, and when our sub agent has completed its work, we'll see the corresponding sub process activated. Okay, so moving into the sub process, we've received the extracted details from our sub agent, and now we're running a comparison. How do the changes in this proposed revision compare to the client's existing contract stored in another system of record? And as you're seeing here, our reconciliation agent is validating those differences. Okay, so moving into the form, the first thing we're going to see here is our AI assistant overview, essentially telling me why this task was routed to me. So as you're seeing here, we have a medium level of confidence over the extracted details, but there are key discrepancies that could have an impact to the business. So looking at the overview page, as you're seeing here, the agents have determined the appropriate account record in our CRM. The license agreement is here in line. But taking a look at the detailed view, we can see the various differences between the prior contract and the current red lines. All right, and then lastly here, moving over to the Actions tab where we can determine how best to proceed in this application. Okay, so with that, that's going to conclude the content for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope this gives you a better understanding of how AgilePoint's ability to orchestrate multiple agents from multiple different vendors can help remove the sorts of manual, error-prone work that plagues many organizations. Thanks so much, and we'll talk to you soon.